All right, welcome everybody. I'm going to give us about 30 seconds here to trickle in, but I got a good bit of content to cover today. So I'm going to get started pretty quickly here. So we'll get started in just a few seconds. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started then. So welcome to today's Lunch and Learn presentation. This is going to cover mainly Splunk Enterprise Security 8, what is Enterprise Security and what is new about it. So we will go a little bit into enterprise security itself, if you're not familiar with it. And then we are going to dig deep into Enterprise Security 8, the newest major version, I should say, of enterprise security. So if we, I guess we should start with a little introduction for myself. My name is Eric Holsinger. I'm a senior Splunk analyst on the Presidio Splunk team's Expertise on Demand team. We work with customers to deal with their Splunk issues, large and small. I've been working with Splunk for a little over 3.5 years now, and I have a number of different Splunk certifications, the highest level being Splunk Architect, and I wanted to add a little bit of couple pictures of my pets. We have my crazy boy Obi, and we have my beautiful boy Max. So those are my two little boys. So that's a little bit about me. So today's agenda, like I said, we will discuss a little bit about what enterprise security is. We will look at ES8, or I guess I should note that I'm going to kind of use enterprise security and ES interchangeably. If you ever hear me say ES, I mean enterprise security. So ES8, what is different and what is new. Then we're going to go through a walkthrough of Enterprise Security 8's new features. And then we're going to move on to a second section where we're going to talk about aligning enterprise security to your organization's security goals, especially with a method called threat modeling. And then we're going to do a walkthrough of that aligning ES to your security goals. So if we go ahead and hop forward here, what is enterprise security? It is a SIEM, a security information and event management tool, a solution that delivers insights and visibility into your security posture to protect your business and mitigate risk. There's over 1,400 out-of-the-box detections, which we will cover in just a minute, to alert on and investigate security events. It is a very powerful tool, but there are a lot of different moving parts to keep track of, so it can be a bit overwhelming, especially if you're just starting out with it. But that is an important thing to note with enterprise security. Very, very powerful tool, offers you a lot of different abilities to work and change things, track security events, but it can be a bit of a beast. So that is a brief overview of what enterprise security is. If you need more information, definitely check out different things online about that. But this particular Lunch and Learn is going to be more about what Enterprise Security 8 is. So Enterprise Security 8.0, so that was released last year, later in the year last year. That is the newest major version of Enterprise Security, and it changed up a few things. So it has a more streamlined and unified user interface. You're able to craft a more dynamic and reliable methodology of incident response. Thanks a lot to that streamlined and unified user interface. It is made with SOAR integration in mind, which we will discuss in a little bit. But that is basically automated responses. And then it aligns with the open cybersecurity schema framework to improve standardization. So if you're working with other tools that use that OCSF, the new Enterprise Security 8 will kind of prescribe to that as well, to make things a little bit more standard across different tools. So we have a couple of different new menus here, and they're not going to show up for us. So we're going to do this. So we have analytics. That includes your security posture, security intelligence, security domains, etc. And we'll look at these in just a little bit. This is basically a little bit of information for people a little bit more used to ES. And then your security content is where your content management, use case library, response plans, etc. are held. So like I said, we are definitely going to look into that. So what has changed? Mission control. So that is what analyst queue, or that is what the analyst queue previously called, excuse me. Mission control and analyst queue are kind of one and the same. They're on the same page, and that is kind of your main beating heart of ES. It's where what used to be known as incident review was. So if you've worked with ES7 or below, you know incident review is where all of your what used to be called correlation searches, their results would come in. You would be able to kind of start triaging events from there. It is now called analyst queue, and it is located inside of mission control. Correlation searches, like I mentioned, are now called detections. We'll deep dive into that as well. And from there, you have two new types of detections now. You have event-based and finding-based, which we'll talk about in just a second. And then notable events are now findings. So notable events, whenever your detection kicks off, so it has a security event that it's tracking, security incident. It used to be called a notable event was created. Now they are called findings, but they're still stored in the notable index. So a little bit of confusion with the naming there, but if you worked with ES7 or below, then you know notable events. Now, if you see an ES8, those are called findings. And my nice little boxes don't want to seem to work. So we'll go look at this here. So these are the two types of correlations. Look at me, detections. So you have event-based and finding-based detections. So like correlation searches, your event-based ones examine patterns and relationships between events. It correlates and filters data to find your issues. Whereas your finding-based detections are like what used to be risk incident rules. So those examine findings to generate risk-based alerting corresponding to the magnitude of the risk for the specific entity. Basically, event-based and finding-based are kind of how they sound. So event-based is going to be looking more for specific events, and your finding-based is going to be looking more at your risk-based alerting. And once those events hit a specific risk level, it's going to give you that finding-based alert. And we're going to deep dive into detections in just a little bit here. So let's press the wrong button here. So what's new? Response plans. So these are templates with standard guidelines so that whenever your detections do kick off, you can create response plans to give your analyst guidelines on what to do specifically if something kicks off that you've seen before. Like I said, it has integration with SOAR, security orchestration and response, or automated response. I have it later on. We'll get the acronym 100% correct. But automated actions and playbooks, and you get an automation history. So this is something I should mention that SOAR is another Splunk product. Used to be known as Phantom, but now it's known as SOAR. And so this is kind of a little bit more deeply involved with Enterprise Security 8 than it was in 7 and below. So you can start sending those detections that get kicked off to your SOAR incidents or your SOAR instance and get those automated responses and playbooks kicked off based off of your ES search findings. We have detection versioning. So if you change a detection, you want to see what has changed between those versions. So say you have version 1.0, it's not working quite correctly. So you create a new version, that'll be version 1.1. It's working good, but not super great. Create version 1.2. Looks like it's working fine. Turns out it's not working the way you want it to. We can now look back at 1.1 and 1.2, see the difference between those versions, and we can start seeing what changed, what we might need to change back without having to remember what it was before. We can now see that within Enterprise Security itself. And then finally, threat intelligence has been expanded. For some cloud environments especially, you can create safe lists. So threat intelligence is a lot about your blacklists. So what are some known IPs, known malicious IPs? We want to make sure we get alerted when those appear. We now can create safe lists. So we know this is a known IP that we want to know that if we see it, it is safe. We can create those lists as well. So jumping into specific aspects of ES8, I mentioned your mission control. So this is kind of the heart of your Enterprise Security 8 environment. So it's used to track, triage, and investigate findings. And again, we go back a couple pages. One more page here. So those are findings, or what used to be notable events. So again, findings. The analyst queue that I mentioned earlier is highly customizable and more streamlined than incident review. And then we have fewer clicks to dig deeper into those findings. So let's go ahead and jump over to a test instance so we can look at mission control. So here we have the homepage of ES8. And let me go ahead and reload, and we're going to go ahead and zoom in a couple times. We'll do this. So this looks pretty similar to your ES7 and below, but we're going to have a couple of different options here. And so we see we have mission control here. We also have it up here. And first thing you might notice if you're used to ES7 or below, a lot less tabs up here. So there's a lot less overall sections. We do have quite a bit of sub dashboards under these. So everything that was in ES7, it's likely in here somewhere, might be a different name. The major ones that had changed names, we've discussed and will continue to discuss. But if you're used to specific dashboards within ES, definitely want to check under analytics. There are dozens and dozens of dashboards within there. But what we're going to focus on is mission control. So let's go ahead and click mission control here. And you can see it's a little bit of fun inside baseball, but even the URL still calls it incident review. But we know it's called mission control. So we look here, and this will look pretty similar to anyone who has used ES7 or below, the incident review page. It is essentially the same thing, just streamlined and made a little bit more performant, a little bit more easier to work with. So you can see we have our time chart of events that have kicked off. So these are our findings, not notable events anymore, our findings. We can see we have our charts. We have urgency, status, owner, domain. We can hide that if we want. We can hide the timeline, make it look however we want. We can change our filters up here if we need to. We can change things here if we need to, if we want to see more per page, if we change our time range. And then we can start digging into these. And so this is a test environment with essentially, fake results here. And so let's just click on one. So you can see we have our type, ID, entity, risk score, time, disposition, urgency, status. And because I'm zoomed in, we're cutting off a little bit here. We have our owner and actions. So under actions, we have a number of different things here. So we can edit it, we can assign it to me in view details, add to investigation, etc. So we have a number of different things we can easily do to this particular finding if we want to. I'm just going to go ahead and click on it itself. It's going to open up this page here. So ES7 and below, whenever you opened up one, there was information below it that would give you a little bit of context around that event. This now opens up a larger panel. We're going to ignore that. This now opens up a larger panel. It's a little bit more robust, a lot more information. So you can see here we have a number of different fields, annotations, detection that was used, given the detection name, if it has a risk score, the source IP, the threat object type, which was IP. Threat intelligence is trying to load there. So we have the original event here, so we can easily see that this was the original event. We have our automation and response history and automation history and adaptive response, and we can easily enter a note. We can say, I am handling this. Save that. Anyone that comes in, let me go to title, Eric's note. Anyone that comes in can say, looking at this, oh, Eric's handling this. And then say, George comes in, George's note. And he could say, this is a false alarm. I've seen it before. So we can easily have these conversations within these findings quickly and easily. We can start an investigation if we want. So if we just click that, it automatically starts an investigation, and we could start really digging into this a lot quicker and a lot easier than ES7 and below. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump back to the queue here. And we're going to let that go. So now, we can see we now have this investigation. And that is from the one that we just clicked on. It's very similar to your incident review before, but it's more performant, a little bit more robust. And like I said, if we go to, I think it might be under all configurations here. And if we scroll down, I know you're here, analyst queue settings. So if we go to configure, all configurations, and then we have our analyst queue settings, we can click on this, and we have a lot of different, so the field values for findings, what do we want to bring out whenever one of those findings come through. If they have these fields, they will automatically get brought out. If we want to add any custom fields, dispositions, so again, we can create these dispositions, say that was a false positive, benign positive, true positive. We can create different statuses that if we want. So if we want to say that pending, if we want to turn that off, nothing will ever be pending here. We want to make sure it's good or it's gone. We can do that if we want. And we can change our investigation types as well. So again, that is mission control. That is what used to be known as incident review. And it has a lot of the same features, but gets you to the meat of investigating and potentially solving a security event a lot quicker. So we're going to hop back over to our PowerPoint. And we're going to look at detections. So like I mentioned a couple times, detections are what was formerly known as correlation searches. And again, I said we had event-based and finding-based detections. I explained what it was a little bit earlier, but I will explain again once we look at those. But detections, you can kind of think of those as the backbone of enterprise security. So these are what's looking for known threats and vulnerabilities, such as anomalies or suspicious behavior. ES will raise an adaptive response when an IOC, indicator of compromise, is detected. So basically what that detection is looking for, once it sees that, it's going to start an adaptive response. The most common adaptive response is to create a finding, what used to be known as a notable event, which can be tracked, updated, and resolved within ES mission control. And that's what we were just looking at. So that panel where we could start an investigation, we could look at what was happening on that event, we can figure out what we need to do to figure if that is a real security threat, it's a false positive, and we can kind of work from there. Other adaptive responses, other than creating a finding, include sending an email, running a script, a number of different things that we'll be able to see. And a big thing that I'll talk about probably a couple times within this is that if you remember from one of the early slides, there's about 1,400 or more detections out of the box with ES. There is a limited number of those that you'll be able to activate, and that'll be based off your environmental limit. So obviously, the more search heads that you have, if you've clustered them, the more searches that you can run, because every search is going to occupy a core. So you can imagine that there's going to be a limited number of searches that can run at one time based off your environmental limit, the number of cores in your environment, etc. So there are a ton of detections within ES. A lot of them you're going to see that it's like, oh, that's useful, that's useful, that's useful, that's useful. A lot of ES, especially whenever you're getting started and maturing, is going to be looking at what detections you truly need, which ones will provide the most value so that you get what you need to out of ES without overloading your environment, which can cause skip searches. Obviously, the more searches that run at one time, the more likely you are to hit that environmental limit. And when you hit that environmental limit, those searches will either delay running, and if they have to delay enough, if they still can't find a place to run where the environment's healthy, you're going to have a skipped search. And within ES, you can imagine that one skipped search could mean a security threat was missed. So we want to limit skip searches in ES as much as possible, preferably always having 0 skip searches so that we never miss a potential security risk or security finding. And so goes hand in hand with detections are data models. So detections are either going to be fed by particular indexes, but a lot of them are going to be fed by data models. And so they often use data models to power these detections to allow for searching across multiple normalized data sets at once. So you can think that your authentication data, which we'll look at in just a bit, might be coming in from 7 different sources. Instead of having to search those 7 indexes at once, we can feed all of those into a data model, and that detection can search that data model instead of having to search everything at once and pull from a number of different data sources. And then we could normalize the fields within those 7 disparate data sources so that if one's called source IP, one's called SRC IP, one's just called SRC, those can all come in into the same field. And that's kind of the benefit of data models. Another benefit of data models is being able to accelerate those, basically creating quick searchable copies of the data within your data model so that you can dramatically speed up the speed of the searches. And again, that comes with drawbacks. The more data that you're accelerating, the more storage you're going to need to keep that data. So definitely recommend accelerating when you can, but you will have an increase in storage. And these data models use the common information model to normalize data that match across many different data sources, like I explained. Many technical add-ons that you can get on Splunk base come with normalization of their data to be SIM compliant. So if you are bringing in data into Splunk and you're wanting to feed it into a data model, definitely recommend looking if there's any TAs that do that normalization work for you. So we're going to hop back over to Splunk here and look at detections. And so to do that, we're going to go to security content, and we're going to look at content management. So let's go ahead and open this. We're going to filter it to our detections here. So again, we have event-based and finding-based detections. So we're going to go ahead and click on event-based detections. And you can see we have, starting out, 1,004 knowledge objects. Those are searches. A lot of different searches. So let's go ahead and click one here. We can see that we have some that are off and on. It's just going to say which ones are on. And let's look at this activity from expired user identity. And so it's going to open up the event-based detection editor. So we're going to let this run here for just a second. We're going to ignore that I don't have permissions because we can still look at it. So you can see we have our name, description, we have the search that's running. So again, this is using a data model. This is not using an accelerated data model, but you can see identity management, expired identity activity, and it's going to be looking for a specific type of event here. We can have our description from our finding details. So if this detection finds an event, what do we want to give it some values for? So you can see if this kicks off, we're going to get a description that the activity from an expired identity was observed. We're going to give it a high severity. We're going to give it a security domain. We're going to allow a drill down search so we can start getting easier investigation of that data if this kicks off. Identity and asset extraction. Again, we have our threat objects. We can put annotations. We can give it a time range. We give it a cron schedule, a condition. So if this has more than 0 results, so even if it has 1 result, we want to know about it. But say it's something that if it has 5 results or more than 5 results, that's what we want to know about. We can change that as well. And then we have our adaptive response. This one actually doesn't kick off anything other than the notable event. But let's see if we can find one. Actually, we can just look at the adaptive response documentation. And it's not going to be there, of course. So let's look at a different one really quick here, see if I can find a good one. Actually, let me just see. No, it's not going to let me create these because I have reduced permissions. Let's see if this is a good one. All right. Gotcha. So we're going to have a little bit of trouble finding the adaptive response. But if you're used to creating a scheduled search in Splunk, it's very similar to that. So if you want it to have an email, if you want it to send out an email to certain people, if you want it to run a script, if it notices it, those are the different things you can also add to your detections within enterprise security. One other thing that I mentioned that's new for ES8 is that version comparison. So you can see we are on version 2.2 of this search. So if we do a diff comparison and we say we want to compare 2.2 to 2.1, and we click to submit here. So we're going to be looking at 2.1 over here, version 2.2 over here, and it's going to give us line by line what is different for these searches. So you can see we changed some of the metadata, we changed the cron schedule, we changed it from disabled equals true to disabled equals false, we changed the dispatch time. So we're able to see what changes were made between those versions so that if it's working differently, if it's not working the way we want it to, we can easily see what changes were made, and we can either roll back, create a new version, and really get an idea of how things changed. And that, once again, is something new within ES8. So I'm going to speed up just a little bit here. And we're going to just very briefly touch on Splunk SOAR here. So like I said, Security Orchestration, Automation, and Response. That's the correct acronym. So SOAR uses playbooks, that's what they call them, to automate incident response and triage alerts. And this is something that's more integrated with Enterprise Security 8 now, something that can be used completely separate from Enterprise Security though. And these playbooks can be simple or complicated multi-step response plans. And SOAR integration within ES8, it's applicable only if you have Splunk SOAR. Again, it is a separate Splunk product that is completely separate from enterprise security. So any kind of SOAR integrations, you need SOAR to be able to use those. So you can configure automation rules to run SOAR playbooks based on those findings in ES. So those detections that we're running, you can run SOAR playbooks based off those findings. And this definitely helps streamline workflows and automating tasks based off those detections. So let me take a sip of water here. While we pull up a very brief demo of SOAR integrations. So again, we're going to pop over to our Splunk. And within ES here, you can see under security content, we do have SOAR playbooks. It'll open up our redirecting to our Splunk SOAR. We also have the ability under configure to look at Splunk SOAR. And so we can see Splunk SOAR is paired with this security, enterprise security environment. So that's definitely something, if you're wanting to use it, we want to make sure that's working. We have our role mapping, we have our base URL, etc. And then we have our automation rules. So this is where we can assign playbooks to detections. So like that says, these will run automatically when our selected detection produces findings. So this detection right here, this Enterprise Security Content Update, that is ESCU, that's what that stands for. So if this detection, malicious PowerShell process, encoded command demo rule, finds a result, it's going to automatically kick off this encoded PowerShell analysis playbook from our SOAR environment. So what does that look like? We're going to go ahead and click playbooks right here. It is going to open up our SOAR instance. And if we searched PowerShell, so we're going to be able to find this encoded PowerShell analysis playbook right here. And if we click this, it is going to show us this long list of things here. And we're going to say yes, yes, yes. And so it has, this is a playbook. So it has basically, if this happens, then do this. a number of different things will automatically kick off. It's going to add a task note, and then it's going to end it. And so that is something that is new to ES8, is that we can say, if this detection kicks off, send this to SOAR, run this, and start running those automated tasks for us, so that something that we might have to do manually before, if we see this kick off, it can now be a automated process because we've made a playbook in SOAR, and we're going to tell it that if it sees this detection kickoff, run this playbook. SOAR is a whole separate beast, so definitely just a brief toe dipped into that pool. So definitely, hopefully, someday we'll have a SOAR lunch and learn, but for now, definitely just know that ES8 has those built-in tendrils that can integrate your SOAR with your ES environment. So then we'll hop over to your threat intelligence management. And so this helps add context that can enrich investigations and enhance security monitoring capabilities. And this has been improved with ES8. So a number of threat intelligence sources come out of the box in ES. This includes the emerging threats IP block list, Cisco top 1 million sites, things like that. So it can automatically associate those IPs, those websites. If it sees those in your data, it can bring out that information automatically. Custom sources can be added, and some expanded functionality for customers with access to the threat management cloud system. Definitely talk to your Splunk account team if you're on cloud and you're interested in having some of that enhanced cloud management threat systems. We'll have a brief demo of threat intelligence here. And so we are going to go back to our configure page once we're over in Splunk, and we're going to go ahead and click threat intelligence. So we're going to have a couple of different things to look at here. So we're looking at our threat intelligence sources. So again, these are the ones that come out of the box. So those emerging threats IP block list, iBlock list Pirate Bay, iBlock list proxy, and you can see what these descriptions are. So these are addresses commonly associated with known Pirate Bay sites. We could turn these off and on if we want, and that will start matching these sources that if it sees, for example, an IP that's commonly associated with Pirate Bay sites, it can automatically let us know that because it has this threat intelligence source. It sees that IP, compares it against this list, brings it out to us saying this is a known malicious IP. Again, you have your threat matching. So you can see it's gonna has your source. It brings out those fields. So if it finds anything from this source with these field values, it will let us know and bring that out automatically. So we're able to put extra context around our data automatically with these well-kept lists of threat intelligence sources. And I mentioned earlier, a new function that is available to some of the cloud customers are the safe lists. So you can create and manage safe list libraries from findings based on benign observables. So we can add a safe list library, or we can add in bulk. So say if we see anything coming from google.com, we don't care about it. We don't have to worry about it. We know that it's going to be coming from something reputable. So basically, these are your reputable sites, and that is also valuable context. And so that is also something that you can add different sources. So you can add your threat intelligence sources. And again, especially if you're in cloud, work with your cloud team to get those custom sources within your threat intelligence. So if you keep something internally, some sort of internal threat list, or you work with another vendor that has their own threat list, not currently in Splunk, you can work to get those integrated into Splunk and start being able to grab that custom context and associate it with your detections within enterprise security. All right, and so that is kind of the walkthrough of Enterprise Security 8, some of the new features, some of the way things have changed. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into part 2 of this Lunch and Learn, and that is aligning enterprise security to your own. It's going on its own. aligning enterprise security to security goals, basically how to make enterprise security work for you. So a lot of this will be looking at different types of threats and threat modeling, um, and how to make ES work with your threat modeling work and associate things with what you're looking to protect and what you're looking to investigate. So just general information about threats. So we have a couple different types that are pretty common in the cybersecurity realm. Your outsider threats. So those are people with no internal knowledge. They have that external posture from the outside trying to get in. You have your nearsider threats. So someone with trusted physical access, some internal knowledge. And then you have your insider. So those are trusted sources with credentials inside your environment that are looking to cause some sort of harm, some sort of data extraction, some sort of something like that. So then we can look at threat modeling. So threat modeling is a structured approach to identify and prioritize threats and vulnerabilities in an environment. And this helps you identify potential attackers and threats, and helps you identify how to mitigate or prevent your threats. So basically the concept goes, you assess the scope, how much are you protecting of your environment, what aspects of your environment are you protecting, what can go wrong, who has your data, who wants it, what can they do with it, how can they get it out. So basically putting on that hacker hat and thinking, if I wanted this data, how would I get it out? Then you have your countermeasures. So then you take off your hacking hat and you put on your anti-hacker hat and you say, how can I counter these people that are trying to get this data, trying to break into our environment? What can we do to stop them? What can we do to get them out if they're in? Those kind of things. And then assess your work. So these things that you put in place, these countermeasures that you put in place, how are they working? Are they working the way you expect them to? Things like that. So enterprise security can help with that, especially those countermeasures, because how are you going to know that they're in? You're going to look at these detections within enterprise security and know that either A, they're in and doing something malicious, or B, they're trying to get in. Let's stop them before they get in. So basically, if you look at your threat modeling, compare that with security goals, like I said, you're looking for what data do we want to protect? How might attacks be reflected in the data? What kind of threats are most relevant for our environment and our capabilities? And how can enterprise security help with our security goals? Because there's 100 different ways, 1,000 different ways that somebody can get at your environment. But like I said, especially with enterprise security and those environmental limits with your detections, you are going to have to pick and choose your battles. You can't activate every detection for every kind of threat. Your environment won't be able to handle it. So threat modeling and then comparing those with your security goals will kind of help you get an idea of what's most important, what's the best way to track that, what's the most efficient way to track that, and start putting those countermeasures in place. And so for our demo, we're going to have a little bit of a role-playing exercise here. So we're going to consider ourselves company A, let's just say we're company Alpha, and we are dealing with, or most concerned about, outside threats. So let's assume for our demo here that we want to protect against brute force login attempts by malicious outside entities. We've had that happen to us a number of times. For some reason, our environment's just extra susceptible to brute force logon attempts. And we just want to make sure that if that happens again, we want to be alerted about it before our system gets compromised like we had before. So we're going to use enterprise security, and we're going to use and customize detections, and that'll allow us for out-of-the-box threat hunting capabilities. We're going to ensure that the relevant data is flowing into Splunk and populating appropriate data models. And then we're going to be able to use the security use case library for assistance. So let's hop on into our demo and continue on from here. So we're going to come into our environment, and we're going to say, first, we're going to want to know what data we're getting. So We're just going to look at our environment. We're going to run a command, pstats count where index equals star by index. Basically, what indexes do we have that has data coming into them over the last 24 hours? So you can see we have 24. We have a couple different ones here. We have main, audit summary, endpoint summary, last chance index, etc. So we have some information there. We could do the same thing with source types. So let's see, source types. We're index, oh, no S. So same thing, but with by source type. So we can have when. So we see we have when event logs. Let's look at the second page. O365 management activity. We might be able to get some authentication events from there. So we're getting a better idea of what data is coming in. We can start looking at these individual indexes and source types to look at the events themselves. And so let's say we've done that. We've collected our list of authentication data, and we want to say, okay, these certain number of sources, source types, are bringing in data that is relevant for authentication, which is what we're going to want to look at for our brute force logins. So if somebody's attempting to authenticate into our environment, we want to know about that. And with that, we're going to look for authentication data. And then we want to feed it into a data model. And so if we go to settings and data models, we can see we have a number of different data models here, but we have one as part of the Splunk Common Information Model called authentication. That looks perfect. So let's go ahead and open that. And I'm going to open up a couple different tabs here. Give me 1 second while I get things situated. So you can see we have our authentication data model. It has a couple of different types of sub-data sets: failed authentication, successful, default, insecure, privileged authentication. And we can start putting data into this data model and start giving it correct tags and macros so that if this data is coming in, it's being fed to the data model as we expect. So for example, the base authentication data model constraints are this SIM authentication data indexes macro, and then data that's tagged with authentication, and then data that's not an action of success in user of star money. So if we run this on its own, outside of the data model, we're able to see the different data sources that will come into this data model over the last 24 hours. So we're going to let this run for a minute. And you can see as it's running, we have a couple of different source types that are bringing data into this constraint. So anything that's matching this constraint is going to be coming into our authentication data model. So you can see we have 5, a majority being the O365 management activity, Linux Secure, Audit Trail, Cloud Trail, AAD sign in. So we have, in this particular case, 5 different data sources that are coming into this data model with authentication data so that we can track essentially 5 different sources of this information all in one place. So we're able to get a broader idea of what's happening in the overall environment rather than having to search these individually. And another thing that we can see is that this is also accelerated. So if we see our data model has the little yellow lightning bolt here, that means that data is accelerated. So let me do a comparison here from data model authentication. And so this is going to be looking at events, and then we're going to do a stats count by host. So this is just a sample search here. And you can see it's running. We're going to get our hosts. We're going to get our data back. And we're going to get it in a pretty decent time here. But if we were to change this to a stats count where data model equals authentication by host, Let's see. I think I might have that. I'm having a difficulty with the syntax there. But essentially, the data model or the T-stats will allow us, and we'll be able to see that in just a minute here. The data model being accelerated will allow us to get that data a lot quicker. So as you can see, size on disk, 55 megabytes, buckets 82, summary range. We're able to, again, every 10 days, custom backfill range. So we're able to get that data a lot quicker. It'll improve our searches and allow us to get our detections done quicker. And so that's our first step. We're getting that scope. We're seeing what we have coming into Splunk to give us more idea of how we can track these brute force login attempts. So after we have that done, so we've identified our data sources, we've identified our data model, we have everything coming in the way we want it to. Now we're going to jump into enterprise security, and we're going to see what we can do within enterprise security itself to help threat hunt based off of our threat modeling. And so we're going to look at a couple different places. To start with, we're going to look at content management. So again, we're going to go back to security content, content management, and we know this is going to be an event-based detection. And again, now we have 1,904 detections. Luckily, we can search things. So let's just look at brute force. So we have a couple of different searches that could be relevant for our brute force attempts. Brute force access behavior detected, brute force access behavior detected over 1 day, AWS IAM assume role policy brute force, assume role policy brute force, etc. So we have a couple different options that we can look at specifically mentioning brute force. So let's go ahead and just click on this brute force access behavior detected. We're going to let it load up here. And so you can see it's going to detect excessive number of failed login attempts along with a successful attempt. So this could indicate a successful brute force attack. So we're going to look at here. So you can see our search from data model authentication.authentication. So that's the authentication data model that we were looking at. It's going to have a stats field where it's going to give us our values of tag, app, and then we're going to be looking at, we're going to get a count of the action field has a value of failure. Then we're going to have a count if the action field has a value of success. And then we're going to do that by source. And so basically it's pulling out a number of different fields. It's going to have that count of failure, count of success. And then we're going to search if the success is greater than 0. And then it has another macro here that is going to let us see if something has a high number of failures and then a success. And so basically, like the description says, it's looking for a large number of failed login attempts, but this one specifically also is looking for that successful login. So it's not just looking for a brute force attempt, it's looking for a successful brute force attempt, potentially. And then with our rest of our detections, it's going to give us a number of different findings here, different things that we can associate it with, more context, our conditions, etc. And again, we do have a couple of different versions here. So we can compare these versions across time. You can see there was a number of different things that were changed here. So echoing back to what we'd looked at before. And so that is kind of step number 1, just kind of searching through your content management, seeing what might be useful. Again, we have another one here. This is brute force detection or brute force activity over 1 day. It's going to look pretty similar, but this one is a little bit different, especially because we have this T-stats summaries only. So again, we have a detection with a successful attempt over a 1 day period. So pretty similar. It's looking for a high number of failed attempts, but with at least 1 successful attempt, which could mean a successful brute force attack. But this has a T-stats and then a summaries only macro. And so this summaries only is now telling us that we're going to be looking at only accelerated data. That's what summaries only equals true means. So that accelerated data model that we have, we are now going to be looking at only the accelerated data, which means our search is going to be much faster. But on the flip side of that, we also have to consider our summary range. With my testing system, it's not a big deal if the summary range is high. It was a year worth of data. In a production environment, that would be so much data, your environment would be overwhelmed with storage needs and unrealistic. Usually a week to 2 weeks is the default acceleration range that we see. And so then we can think that if we have a acceleration range of 7 days, it's going to accelerate 7 days worth of data that has come into that data model. And so if we search summaries only equals true over 14 days, we're only going to get that 7 days worth of data. So that's kind of the thing you have to watch out for with accelerated data, is that if you're searching accelerated data, make sure the time that your search is looking at is not beyond your acceleration range. You want it to be below your acceleration range, just so that you make sure that you're not only getting the speed increase, but you're also getting all of the data that you're expecting. And so we've looked at these. We think they're pretty good. But is there anything else that can help us with our looking at preventing our brute force attacks? So we do have the ability, search content management, filter on words that we think might be relevant. We also have the security use case library, also under security content. So we're going to go ahead and click that. And so this is a great tool, especially if you're getting started out with enterprise security, to give you an idea of a number of different detections that might be relevant for what you're looking at. So again, we have 293 analytic stories. So your analytic stories are collections of detections. So for example, this 3CX supply chain attack gives you the description. So these are things that might be relevant to tracking down that particular vulnerability. So if we search, there we go. I want to learn how to type here, brute force. So let's just see if there's anything for brute force. We're going to give it a minute to load our filter here. So you can see we have 8 analytic stories found. None of these specifically say brute force, but they might be relevant to brute force attacks. So for example, access protection, Active Directory account or Active Directory password spraying, Azure Active Directory account takeover, compromised user account. These are things that might be relevant to brute force. Not necessarily one-to-one, but they might give you a really good idea of places to look at to start that brute force hunt, brute force threat hunting. But also beyond that, what's step number 2? Step number 1 is find out that attempt. Step number 2, say that attempt was successful, like those other detections that we were looking for. What are some other correlate detections that we can activate that will help us start tracking what happens after? So let's just go ahead and look at compromised user account. We're going to go ahead and click on this analytic story. And it's going to open up a number of different things for us. So as you can see, it associates MITRE attacks, NIST, CIS, gives us a narrative, references, and then it's going to give us a number, and this one's actually a pretty long list compared to some other ones, a long list of detections that might be relevant or are relevant for our compromised user account that we can start looking at that may also be relevant to brute force. So you can see detect password spray attempts. So something that's trying to high number of failed authentication attempts from a single source. So not necessarily calling out brute force, but something similar to brute force attempts. Another one, let's see, AWS, high number of failed authentications from IP, specifically for AWS sources. Let's look at another one here. Let's see. Azure, AD, high number of failed authentications from a IP. All of these that are over here, all of these different ones have the information that we want about that. So let's look at this Azure AD one. We have our description, we have our explanation, we have the search that it's going to run. We can run that in here if we want. Gives you how to implement it. So it's asking, or it's recommending that you install the latest version of the Splunk Cloud add-on for cloud services. And then obviously ingest those Azure Active Directory events. And then even known false positives. Oops. So an IP address with more than 20 failed authentication attempts in the span of 10 minutes may also be triggered by a broken application. So not only does it give you explanation, the search itself, how to implement it, it also lets you know, in the past, we've seen this happen. It's a known false positive. Keep an eye out for that in your environment. And so we can edit detection. It'll open up that security content management page for that particular detection. There we can change things as needed. We can activate things as needed. And we can really start threat hunting from there. And so that's basically, we've kind of threat modeled our environment, what we wanted to protect, what do we want to protect against, how do we want to protect it. We came into Splunk, we confirmed our data sources that we have relevant to, in our particular case, brute force attempts. So we were recognizing our authentication data, making sure that's flowing to the authentication index, because we know that enterprise security detections often use the authentication data model if you're looking for things like that. So then we searched under security content and content management, specifically for brute force. We found a couple of searches that might be relevant. We can activate those if needed, those detections, give those different adaptive responses if we want. And then we came into security use case library, and we were able to start digging deeper on not just brute force attempts, but different types of multiple login failed attempts, and then what happens beyond. So if they are in, what are they going to do now? Let's start activating detections for that as well. So as part of that threat modeling, we're setting up our countermeasures for awareness of what's happening and what might be happening after something might work or fail. And again, overall, we can start associating things that we discussed earlier. So if we're looking at brute force attempts, we can associate that with our threat intelligence feeds. We know these are malicious IPs. If they're coming in and trying to do a brute force attempt in our environment, we have that association with our threat intelligence. Once we have a detection that's been kicked off, so say we activated that first brute force detection that we looked at, and that has found a finding, we'll be able to come into mission control, look at our analyst queue, and start investigating and really digging deeper into that event, seeing where it's coming from, finding the data that's around it, and really start threat hunting in our environment. And like I said in the PowerPoint, making enterprise security work for us. So again, that is our PowerPoint here. So if we go back to our agenda, we covered what was enterprise security. We covered ES8, what is different and what is new. We had our walkthrough of enterprise security and some of the new features. Then we talked about our aligning our ES to our security goals and our threat modeling. And then we just finished that walkthrough. And so as we come to the end here, if you need help, if you need professional help with enterprise security or getting enterprise security started, I know it's a big beast coming in, getting that fresh, fancy enterprise security and not knowing where to start. Definitely reach out to us for help. We will get you that help that you need at Presidio here. So definitely feel free to reach out. And as always, thank you. My name again, Eric Holsinger, Senior Splunk Analyst at the Presidio team. If you need me, there's my email on screen. But otherwise, thank you everybody for joining, and we will see you next month for our next Lunch and Learn.